Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a review of World War Z by Max Brooks. I read this book as my lone representative of the horror genre in my effort this year to read, outside my comfort zone, to read more genre fiction. I read 2 sci-fi books. I read, I think, more than 2 fantasy books. I read 2 mystery novels. I read 1 YA. I read 1 romance, and now I've read 1 book from the horror genre. I believe. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of honor that and make what's probably might be my last review video of the year by talking about World War Z. Now, this book was published back in 2007, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it is the book that kind of set off the whole zombie trend, which I believe replaced the vampire trend. Anyway, I've never been I never watched any episodes of The Walking Dead. To be honest with you, the whole zombie thing never impacted me or affected me at all, but I had heard that this was a really good kind of horror novel, and so I wanted to read it. I will say that up front that I wasn't particularly impressed by the novel as a novel. There were some things about the novel that I thought were really quite good. I think its structure is inventive. What Brooks does is he creates this person who's supposed to be compiling a government report about this world war which took place against zombies when essentially a zombie pandemic broke out across the world, where in the classic zombie lore, anybody who was bitten by a zombie would become a zombie and then they would crave human flesh, and that this thing spread like a virus across the world, and that all the countries of the world had to come up with their own way of kind of dealing with this, and then in the end cooperating together. And he has the story told in a series of interviews that this person who was compiling this government report conducted. And that's pretty inventive because it allows him to kind of approach the book as, as the subtitle says, as an oral history of the zombie war. I thought that was good. I am impressed by how much time and effort Brooks spent in thinking about all the problems that would come from a zombie pandemic. How do you kill zombies who have to be shot in the brain? How does this affect all of our military technology? How do we deal with zombies who end up on the bottom of the ocean and slowly work their way out over years? And, how do we prevent the zombie contagion from continuing to spread? Who gets sacrificed? There are all kinds of things like that. And his ability to think in detail and to come up with all these detailed issues that have to be worked out in the case of this kind of zombie pandemic is impressive. But in terms of a novel, I found that it didn't really keep my interest for long periods of time. It was kind of a struggle for me to read. And as I realized it wasn't going to be a fast read, something that I cheerfully went back to over and over again, I just kind of set myself a page, goal for every day or every other day of reading, and I stuck to that for the most part. So to me, the problems that exist in it have to do with the way in which it's written. So in theory, the person writing this report, which becomes World War Z, an oral history of the zombie war, interviews lots of different people. Well, the problem with that is that Max Brooks has to be able to write in the voice of at least, I think, 24 different people, and he just can't. He's just not that good of a writer. In the end, all the voices end up sounding the same, and in the end, he introduces so many characters that without a flowchart, I wouldn't have been able, without a flowchart, I couldn't keep up with exactly who he was talking to, because some of the people, apparently he interviews more than once, and that gives you some idea of the confusion. Secondarily, for me, the book didn't work, and I didn't think it was particularly good because it's just really not that exciting. I mean, once you work out kind of all the horrors that go along with this kind of zombie pandemic and all the problems the government has to work through, then it just comes down to killing zombies and different ways in which zombies can be killed, and different kind of nightmare situations in which zombies can show up. And it just didn't work for me, and in part it didn't work for me because the zombie thing just isn't scary. It just it just wasn't scary in the book. What was scary in the book, and this is the part which I think is kind of a subtext of what Brooks was writing about, which feels very pertinent at the time we live in today. What was scary in the book is that Brooks kind of predicts, in the case of this kind of worldwide pandemic, that some governments would react better than others, that some governments would completely fail, that some governments would react too late, that some governments would be overconfident, like the United States, that some surprising governments would be the ones who deal with it most successfully. The island nation of Cuba in World War Z is one of the nations that deals with the zombie pandemic most effectively, which reminded me of the island nation of New Zealand and the success that they've had in dealing with the current pandemic. And maybe it was just that reading about a zombie pandemic in the middle of an actual pandemic was a bad idea, but I thought kind of that subtext and maybe that unintentional kind of way of terrifying us about the possibilities of real pandemics instead of made-up pandemics was actually the scariest part of the book. So, if this is the kind of book that sounds like it would be good for you, that's fine. I just think that for me, not somebody who really enjoys horror novels, and not somebody who's ever really been into the whole zombie thing, that as a horror novel it wasn't scary, and it was only really scary in the idea of geopolitical government failures and not the zombies themselves. Anyway, there you go. There's my review of World War Z by Max Brooks. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.